The PRC continues to make steady improvements to joint operations in the 5 theater commands, which were established in early 2016. Each theater command receives direction from the CMC, has operational authority over assigned PLA forces within its theater, and is responsible for all conventional combat and non-combat operations within its area of responsibility. Theater commands are responsible for developing theater-specific strategies aimed at preparing to fight and win against an adversary, developing joint operational plans and military capabilities, responding to crises, and safeguarding the sovereignty and stability of its claimed territories. The strategic directions of the theater commands are based on Chinese perceptions of peripheral threats. Title I Eastern Theater Command. The Eastern Theater Command has responsibility for the ECS and likely executes operational control over military matters related to Taiwan and Japan, including contingencies in and around the Taiwan Strait and the Senkaku Islands. During 2022, the Eastern Theater Command maintained focus on a series of training and exercises to improve joint operations and combat readiness, organizing exercises and drills consisting of long-distance training and mobilization, aerial combat, live-fire training, and the use of modified civilian ferries to help augment transportation. Title II, East China SCA, ECS. The PRC claims sovereignty over the Japanese-administered Senkaku Islands in the ECS, which Taiwan also claims. Beijing continues to uphold the importance of the 2014 four-point consensus, which states Japan and the PRC will acknowledge divergent positions over the ECS but prevent escalation through dialogue, consultation, and crisis management mechanisms. The United States does not take a position on sovereignty of the Senkaku Islands but recognizes Japan's administration of the islands and continues to reaffirm that the islands fall within the scope of Article 5 of the U.S.-Japan Mutual Security Treaty. In addition, the United States opposes any unilateral actions that seek to undermine Japan's administration of the islands. The PRC uses maritime law enforcement ships and aircraft to patrol near the Senkaku Islands, not only to demonstrate its sovereignty claims, but also to improve readiness and responsiveness to potential contingencies. In 2022, the PRC continued to conduct regular patrols into the contiguous zone territorial seas around the Senkaku Islands and stepped up efforts to challenge Japan's control over the islands by increasing the duration and assertiveness of its patrols. For the third year in a row, CCG ships entered Japanese-claimed waters for more than 100 consecutive days, including over 300 days in the contiguous zones around the islands in 2022. In December 2022, the CCG conducted the longest entrance to date into the Senkaku Islands territorial waters, with 4 ships remaining in the waters for nearly 73 hours. The previous record for territorial waters entrance duration was 64 hours, set in July 2022. The increased PRC assertiveness around the Senkaku Islands caused Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida to express grave concern in November to President Xi during the first meeting between Chinese and Japanese leaders since December 2019. The two leaders agreed to re-establish a maritime and aerial hotline between the two countries' militaries to resume security dialogue, which the two defense ministers later used for the first time in May 2023. Title III, Southern Theater Command. The Southern Theater Command covers mainland and maritime Southeast Asia, including the SCS. This geographic area implies that the Southern Theater Command is responsible for securing the SCS, supporting the Eastern Theater Command in any operation against Taiwan, and assuring the security of sea lines of communication, SLOCs, vital to China's global ambitions in the SCS. The Southern Theater Command is responsible for responding to U.S. freedom of navigation operations in the SCS by regularly tracking and reacting to U.S. ships operating within the China-claimed 9-dash line. The Southern Theater Command is responsible for training, force disposition, and operations in the SCS. The Southern Theater Command also plays a significant role in the PLA's bilateral and multilateral exercises with countries in Southeast Asia, such as participating in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief exercise with Thailand in 2022. The PLA Hong Kong and Macau garrisons are subordinate to the Southern Theater Command. In August 2022, the PLA Hong Kong and Macau garrisons conducted an annual rotation of forces. Since 1997, the PLA has rotated forces by land, air, and sea from Shenzhen at night, nominally as part of the usual annual rotation. Since the 2019 pro-democracy protests, China maintains a rotational deployment of PAP forces in Hong Kong. The PAP and PLA units continued to publicly highlight their anti-riot, counter-terrorism, and disaster prevention training. All of the PLA's 24 Su-35s purchased from Russia are assigned to the Southern Theater Command Air Force and have flown patrols in the SCS and into the Western Pacific. The Southern Theater Command was also the first command to receive the plan's H-6J maritime strike bombers. In December 2019, the PRC commissioned its first domestically produced aircraft carrier, Shandong, into service at Yulin Naval Base in the Southern Theater Command. In April, the Shandong conducted its first training exercise in the Philippine Sea with J-15 aircraft entering Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone for the first time, demonstrating the PLA's increased capabilities further from China's borders. Title IV: Developments in the Security Situation in the SCS. In July 2016, pursuant to provisions in the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, an arbitral tribunal convened at the Philippines' behest ruled that the PRC's claims to historic rights in the SCS, depicted by the 9-dash line, were not compatible with UNCLOS. Since December 2019, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Vietnam have explicitly referenced the arbitral ruling in notes verbals to the UN denying the validity of the PRC's historic rights and 9-dash line claims. Beijing, however, categorically rejects the tribunal decision, and the PRC continues to use coercive tactics, including the employment of PLA naval, Coast Guard, and paramilitary vessels, to enforce its claims. The PRC does so in ways calculated to remain below the threshold of provoking conflict. In 2022, the PRC continued to impose a yearly, unilateral 3-month fishing ban that includes the waters inside the EEZ of the Philippines and Vietnam to incrementally enforce its de facto maritime claims. Point 1. The PRC states that international military presence within the SCS is a challenge to its sovereignty. Throughout 2022, the PRC deployed plan, CCG, and civilian ships to maintain a presence in disputed areas, such as near Scarborough Reef and Thitu Island, as well as in response to oil and gas exploration operations by rival claimants within the PRC's claimed 9-dash line. Separately, the CCG and People's Armed Forces Maritime Militia, PFMM, used nets and ropes to block Philippine supply boats on their way to an atoll in the SCS and issued radio challenges and threats to Philippine ships during routine resupply missions. Point 2. In November 2022, a CCG vessel forcibly seized apparent PRC rocket debris that had fallen near Philippine-occupied Thitu Island from the Philippines by cutting the tow line of a Philippine Navy vessel as it was towing debris back to shore. PRC insisted the debris was returned to them after a friendly negotiation, despite the Philippines producing video evidence of the incident and issues diplomatic notes of protest. Point 3. In March 2022, the Philippines lodged a diplomatic protest after a CCG ship maneuvered within 21 meters of a Filipino vessel near Scarborough Shoal. This was the 4th time in under a year that the CCG had maneuvered dangerously close to Philippine vessels. Point 4. In December 2022, the Philippines expressed serious concern over reports that the PRC had reclaimed several unoccupied land features in the SCS, notably at 4 features in the Spratly Islands. The Philippines noted that new construction contravenes the Declaration of Conduct on the South China Sea's undertaking on self-restraint and the 2016 Arbitral Award, while Beijing denied any actions and emphasized dialogue between the two nations. Title V: SCS outposts capable of supporting military operations. Since early 2018, the PRC-occupied Spratly Islands outposts have been equipped with advanced anti-ship and anti-aircraft missile systems and military jamming equipment, representing the most capable land-based weapons systems deployed by any claimant in the disputed SCS areas to date. In mid-2021, the PLA deployed an intelligence-gathering ship and a surveillance aircraft to the Spratly Islands during U.S.-Australia bilateral operations in the region. From early 2018 through 2022, the PRC regularly used its Spratly Islands outposts to support naval and Coast Guard operations in the SCS. The PRC has added more than 3,200 acres of land to the 7 features it occupies in the Spratlys. China has also added military infrastructure, including 72 aircraft hangars, docks, satellite communication equipment, antenna array, radars, and hardened shelters for missile platforms. The PRC has stated these projects are mainly to improve marine research, safety of navigation, and the living and working conditions of personnel stationed on the outposts. However, the outposts provide airfields, berthing areas, and resupply facilities that allow the PRC to maintain a more flexible and persistent military and paramilitary presence in the area. This improves the PRC's ability to detect and challenge activities by rival claimants or third parties and widens the range of response options available to Beijing. Title VI: Western Theater Command. The Western Theater Command is geographically the largest theater command within the PRC and is responsible for responding to conflict with India and what the PRC refers to as terrorist threats in Western China. PLA units located within the Western Theater Command include 76th and 77th Group Armies and ground forces subordinate to Xinjiang and Zhejiang military districts, 3 PLAF bases, 1 transportation division, 1 flying academy, and 1 PLARF base. Within China, the Western Theater Command focuses on Xinjiang and Tibet autonomous regions, where the CCP perceives a high threat of separatism and terrorism, particularly among Uyghur populations in Xinjiang. According to the U.S. Department of State's 2022 Country Reports on Human Rights Practices in the PRC, genocide and crimes against humanity occurred during the year against the predominantly Muslim Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minority groups in Xinjiang. Authorities were reported to have arbitrarily detained more than 1 million ethnic Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, and other Muslims in extrajudicial internment camps designed to erase religious and ethnic identities. Although PRC government officials justified the camps under the pretense of combating terrorism, separatism, and extremism, information from the international community, including the UN, refute such justifications. Moreover, oppression of Muslim Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minority groups in Xinjiang is likely used by extremist organizations as a propaganda and recruiting tool, generating new threats to the region. Since early May 2020, sustained tensions along the India-China border have dominated the Western Theater Command's attention. Differing perceptions between India and the PRC regarding border demarcations along the LAC, combined with recent infrastructure construction on both sides, led to multiple clashes, an ongoing standoff, and military buildups along the shared border. In response to a skirmish in June 2020 between PRC and Indian patrols in Galwan Valley, the most violent clash between the two countries in 45 years, the Western Theater Command implemented a large-scale mobilization and deployment of PLA forces along the LAC. Commander-level negotiations meant to reduce tensions continued in December 2022 with the 17th round of talks. The Western Theater Command's deployments along the LAC will likely continue through 2023. Title VII: China-India Border. Beginning in May 2020, PRC and Indian forces faced off in clashes with rocks, batons, and clubs wrapped in barbed wire at multiple locations along the LAC. The resulting standoff triggered the buildup of forces on both sides of the disputed border. Each country demanded the withdrawal of the other's forces and a return to pre-standoff conditions, but neither China nor India agreed on those conditions. The PRC blamed the standoff on Indian infrastructure construction, which it perceived as encroaching on PRC territory, while India accused China of launching aggressive incursions into India's territory. On June 15, 2020, patrols violently clashed in Galwan Valley and resulted in the death of approximately 20 Indian soldiers and 4 PLA soldiers. This incident was the deadliest clash between the two since the 1962 Sino-Indian War. Following the 2020 clash, the PLA has maintained continuous force presence and continued infrastructure build-up along the LAC. Point 1. In 2022, China continued to develop military infrastructure along the LAC. These improvements include underground storage facilities near Doklam, new roads in all 3 sectors of the LAC, new villages in disputed areas in neighboring Bhutan, a second bridge over Pangong Lake, a dual-purpose airport near the center sector, and multiple helipads. Point 2. In 2022, China deployed 1 border regiment, supported by 2 divisions of Xinjiang and Tibet military districts with 4 combined arms brigades, CAB, in reserve in the western sector of the LAC. China also deployed as many as 3 light to medium CABs in the eastern sector from other theater commands and an additional 3 CABs in the central sector of the LAC. Although some elements of a light CAB eventually withdrew, a majority of the deployed forces remain in place along the LAC. Point 3. On July 17, China and India held the 16th round of Corps Commander-level talks focusing on the resolution of border disagreements in the western sector of the LAC. Both sides agreed to withdraw forces from the Gagra Hot Springs area of the LAC and to maintain dialogue through military and diplomatic channels to reach a mutually acceptable solution to the remaining border issues. 2 previous rounds of Corps Commander-level talks in March and January made no progress to resolve the China-India border dispute. Point 4. On September 8, Chinese and Indian forces began to withdraw from the Gagra Hot Springs area along the western sector of the LAC. This withdrawal was the direct result of the 16th round of Corps Commander-level talks held in July. Point 5. On October 14, representatives from China and India attended a virtual 25th meeting of Working Mechanism for Consultation and Coordination, WMCC. Both sides lauded the recent withdrawal of forces from the border and agreed to take measures to reduce border tension and shift from emergency response to regular management of the border areas. The 24th WMCC was held on May 31 with no significant progress being made to disengage from the western sector of the LAC. Point 6. On December 9, hundreds of Chinese and Indian forces clashed along the eastern sector of the LAC near the Yangtze area of Tabang, India. Both sides previously agreed to not use firearms along the border, instead they used sticks and clubs as weapons. However, both Chinese and Indian forces sustained injuries. Media reports described the skirmish as the worst since the 2020 Galwan Valley incident. Point 7. On December 20, China and India held the 17th round of Corps Commander-level talks at the Chushul-Moldo border meeting point in China. This round of talks was not announced unlike previous talks and came 10 days after Chinese and Indian forces clashed along the eastern sector of the LAC near the Yangtze area of Tabang, India. No agreements were made during this meeting and both sides pledged to continue dialogue through military and diplomatic channels. Title 8. Northern Theater Command. The Northern Theater Command includes the PRC's provinces bordering Mongolia, Russia, North Korea, and the Yellow Sea. It is responsible for operations along China's northern periphery and border security associated with North Korean, Russia, and Mongolia. PLA units located within the Northern Theater Command include the 78th, 79th, and 80th Group Armies, the Northern Theater Navy and its Naval Aviation Division and 2 Marine Brigades, and 2 operational PLAF bases, 1 Special Mission Aircraft Division, and 1 Flying Academy, and 1 PLARF base. During a contingency, the Northern Theater Command likely exercises command over some SSF units in theater and receives strategic intelligence support from the SSF to improve battlefield awareness and facilitate joint operations within the theater. The North Sea Fleet is responsible primarily for protecting the sea approaches to northern China but could provide mission-critical assets to support other fleets during contingencies located beyond the Northern Theater. In 2022, Northern Theater Command forces conducted various joint and single-service training activities including carrier navigation and flight training, and likely conducted UAS training. Title IX, Central Theater Command. The Central Theater Command's primary responsibility is to defend the capital and CCP leadership while providing a strategic reserve to the other theater commands. It is centrally located, connecting the 4 remaining theater commands. Major military units under the Central Theater Command military include the PLA's 81st, 82nd, and 83rd Group Armies, and the PLAF's 13th Transport Division, 34th VIP Transport Division, 36th Bomber Division, 15th Airborne Corps, and the Shijiazhuang Flying Academy. Other assets in the Central Theater Command include PLA Rocket Force and the Wuhan and Datong bases. Title X, Developments in the Security Situation in the Taiwan Strait. Throughout 2022, the PRC conducted large-scale joint military exercises focused on training to deter further U.S. and Allied operations along China's periphery. Many of these exercises focused on combat realism and have featured night missions, training in extreme weather, and simultaneous multi-domain operations. The PLA is preparing for a contingency to unify Taiwan with the PRC by force if perceived as necessary by Beijing, while simultaneously deterring, delaying, or denying any third-party intervention, such as the United States and/or other like-minded partners, on Taiwan's behalf. As part of a comprehensive campaign to pressure Taiwan and the Tsai administration and signal its displeasure at deepening Washington-Taipei ties, the PRC has persistently conducted military operations near Taiwan and military training for a Taiwan contingency. Throughout 2022, the PLA increased provocative actions in and around the Taiwan Strait, to include ballistic missile overflights of Taiwan, significantly increased flights into Taiwan's self-declared air defense identification zone, and conducted a series of large-scale military exercises around Taiwan. At the 20th Party Congress in 2022, Xi Jinping repeated the CCP's long-standing public position that China seeks peaceful unification with Taiwan but would never renounce the use of force as an option. Additionally, the CCP amended its constitution to reaffirm that it will resolutely oppose and deter Taiwan independence. The circumstances under which the PRC has historically indicted it would consider the use of force has evolved over time. PLA aircraft entering Taiwan ADIZ. Tensions between the PRC and Taiwan increased in 2022, as the PRC intensified political and military pressure aimed at Taiwan. Following the U.S. Speaker of the House Codel to Taiwan in August 2022, Beijing released a new Taiwan White Paper, which was the third paper issued by Beijing since 1993. The content of the White Paper appears consistent with familiar talking points from Beijing, albeit with a more pointed tone. It highlights that unification is foundational to the PRC's national rejuvenation, Beijing's preference for peaceful reunification under the one country, two systems framework, and a refusal to renounce the use of force to compel reunification if needed. Unlike the previous Taiwan White Paper, released in 2000, this iteration explicitly calls out Taiwan's ruling Democratic People's Party for having adopted a separatist stance, and features heavier criticism on external interference by singling out the United States.
The paper further asserts that all U.S. interference in Taiwan is guided by a strategy to use Taiwan as a pawn in an effort to contain China.
The PRC continues to suspend formal communications with Taiwan, which began in 2016, and remains steadfast that Taiwan must accept the PRC's view of the 1992 consensus to restart such engagement. China's leaders have directly equated the 1992 consensus to the PRC's One China principle, which was reaffirmed by President Xi in a January 2019 address to compatriots in Taiwan. Title: 11 PLA Coercive and Risky Operational Behavior. The PLA's coercive and risky air and maritime activity, particularly in the East and South China Seas, continued throughout 2022 and into 2023. The PLA's coercive and risky activities includes unsafe, unprofessional, and other behaviors that seek to impinge upon the ability of the United States and other nations to safely conduct operations where international law allows. The goal of the PLA's behavior is to pressure the United States and other nations to reduce or cease lawful operations near areas Beijing claims territorial sovereignty. Examples of the PRC's coercive and risky operational behavior against U.S. and allied aircraft have included lasing, i.e., the use of military-grade lasers against a target, reckless maneuvers, i.e., maritime bow crossings and barrel rolls, and acrobatics in close proximity to aircraft, close approaches in the air or at sea, high rates of closure, i.e., rapid approaches, discharging objects, i.e., chaff or flares, in front of, or in close proximity to, aircraft, and other actions. The PLA's behavior contravenes flight safety protocols and the international maritime rules of the road, increases the risk of a major accident, incident, or crisis, including the potential for loss of life. Over the last 18 months, the PLA appears to have been engaged in a centralized, concerted campaign to perform these risky behaviors in order to coerce a change in lawful U.S. operational activity, and that of U.S. allies and partners. Prior to the fall of 2021, the PLA routinely intercepted foreign air and maritime assets operating in the Indo-Pacific, but these earlier interactions rarely involved PLA employment of coercive and risky behavior. Between the fall of 2021 and fall of 2023, the United States has documented over 180 instances of PLA coercive and risky air intercepts against U.S. aircraft in the region, more in the past 2 years than in the previous decade. Over the same period, the PLA has conducted around 100 instances of coercive and risky operational behavior against U.S. allies and partners, in an effort to deter both the United States and others from conducting lawful operations in the region. The PRC's messaging regarding its forces' operational behavior, such as claiming it is justified to take forceful countermeasures against activities that Beijing labels provocative, suggests centralized coordination, not the behavior of a few isolated PLA officers. Title 12: PRC Military Courses of Action Against Taiwan. Although Beijing reaffirms that peaceful reunification is its preferred course of action, the PRC continues to signal its willingness to use military force against Taiwan. The PLA has a range of options to coerce Taipei based on its increasing capabilities in multiple domains. The PRC could increasingly signal its readiness to use force or conduct punitive actions against Taiwan. The PLA could also conduct a range of cyberspace, blockade, and kinetic campaigns designed to force Taiwan to capitulate to unification or compel Taiwan's leadership to the negotiation table on the PRC's terms. In any case, the PRC would seek to deter potential U.S. intervention in any Taiwan contingency campaign. Failing that, the PRC would attempt to delay and defeat intervention in a limited war of short duration. In the event of a protracted conflict, the PLA might choose to escalate cyberspace, space, or nuclear activities in an attempt to end the conflict, or it might choose to fight to a stalemate and pursue a political settlement. The PLA could offer Xi the following military options against Taiwan, listed below individually or in combination, with varying degrees of feasibility's associated risk. The PRC's perception of domestic and international receptivity to military action, the expected impact on its economy of resulting sanctions, political trends in Taiwan, and its level of confidence in the PLA's capability to conduct a successful invasion of Taiwan will determine which military option the PRC chooses during crises. The PLA practiced elements of each of these military options during its August 2022 large-scale military exercise aimed at pressuring Taiwan, and again in April 2023 in response to Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen's transit of the United States. Air and maritime blockade. PLA writings describe a joint blockade campaign in which the PRC would employ blockades of maritime and air traffic, including a cutoff of Taiwan's vital imports, to force Taiwan's capitulation. Large-scale missile strikes and possible seizures of Taiwan's offshore islands would accompany a joint blockade campaign in an attempt to compel Taiwan's surrender, while at the same time, posturing air and naval forces to conduct weeks or months of blockade operations if necessary. The PRC likely would complement its air and maritime blockades with concurrent EW, network attacks, and IO to further isolate Taiwan's authorities and populace and to control the international narrative of the conflict. Limited force or coercive options. The PRC could use a variety of disruptive, punitive, or lethal military actions in a limited campaign against Taiwan, probably in conjunction with overt and clandestine economic and political activities supported by IO to shape perceptions or undercut the effectiveness or legitimacy of the Taiwan authorities. Such a campaign could include computer network or limited kinetic attacks against Taiwan's political, military, and economic infrastructure to induce fear in Taiwan and degrade the Taiwan population's confidence in their leaders. Similarly, PLASOF could infiltrate Taiwan and conduct attacks against infrastructure or leadership targets. Air and missile campaign. The PRC could use precision missile and air strikes against key government and military targets, including air bases, radar sites, missiles, space assets, and communications facilities to degrade Taiwan's defenses, neutralize its leadership, or undermine the public's resolve to resist. Amphibious invasion of Taiwan. PRC writings describe different operational concepts for an amphibious invasion of Taiwan. The most prominent of these, the Joint Island Landing Campaign, envisions a complex operation relying on coordinated, interlocking campaigns for EW, logistics, air, and naval support. The objectives are to break through or circumvent Taiwan's shore defenses, establish a beachhead, build up combat power along Taiwan's western coastline, and seize key targets or the entire island. The PLA continues to test new options to force unification. In October 2022, 7 Chinese civilian car ferries under CMM participated in amphibious landing drills on Chinese beaches in the Taiwan Strait. In August 2022, in response to the U.S. Speaker of the House Codell to Taiwan, the PLA conducted joint exercises focusing on establishing air, maritime, and information superiority. The exercise consisted of joint air and maritime activities to the north, southwest, and southeast of Taiwan, focused on establishing air dominance, according to Eastern media reporting. A large-scale amphibious invasion would be one of the most complicated and difficult military operations for the PLA, requiring air and maritime superiority, the rapid buildup and sustainment of supplies onshore, and uninterrupted support. It would likely strain the PRC's armed forces and invite a strong international response. These factors, combined with inevitable force attrition, the complexity of urban warfare, and potential for an insurgency, make an amphibious invasion of Taiwan a significant political and military risk for Xi and the CCP, even assuming a successful landing and breakout past Taiwan beachhead defenses. Small island seizure. The PLA also is capable of attempting various amphibious operations short of a full-scale invasion of Taiwan. With few overt military preparations beyond routine training, the PRC could launch an invasion of small Taiwan-occupied islands in the SCS, such as Pratas or ITU-ABA.
A PLA invasion of a medium-sized, better defended island, such as Matsu or Kinmen, is also within the PLA's capabilities.
Such an invasion would demonstrate military capability, political resolve, and achieve tangible territorial gain while simultaneously showing some measure of restraint.
However, this kind of operation involves significant, and possibly prohibitive, political risk because it could galvanize pro-independence sentiment on Taiwan and generate powerful international opposition.
Title 13, Civilian Roll-On/Roll-OFF, RARO, ships in there. Potential use in a Taiwan invasion.
The lack of significant PLA amphibious ship buildup does not independently reflect a PLA deficiency toward building a military option to take Taiwan by force, but rather, is consistent with the PRC's exploratory approach to testing multi-dimensional Taiwan seizure concepts.
In 2015, China's official media reported that all future builds of 5 categories of civilian vessels had to be built to national defense requirements, including container ships, RARO ferries, multipurpose vessels, bulk carriers, and break bulk ships. In 2019, images emerged on Chinese state television that at least one of its RARO ferries had been modified with a ramp to allow amphibious vehicles to disembark at sea, suggesting these ferries could be used to deliver first-echelon forces without requiring prior seizure of a pier. By demonstrating intent to use commercial RAROs during an amphibious invasion, the PLA is eroding the principle of distinction under the law of armed conflict and obscuring crucial lines between warships and non-warships, civilians and combatants, and civilian objects and military objectives. In a similar state media disclosure, images emerged in 2021 showing that China had modified a flat-deck container vessel to function as a landing platform helicopter, LPH, or as an expeditionary transfer dock, ESD. Such modification could serve as a midway refueling point for helicopters returning from delivering air assault forces to Taiwan or enable PLA helicopters to transport forward stocks of logistics ashore. Although China has not officially revealed the size of its civilian fleet or how it plans to use it during an invasion, 2019 information indicated the PLA have at least 63 civilian RAROs suitable for military operations.
Subsequent information from one Chinese province indicates as many as 64 civilian RAROs would be made available to the PLA in wartime and that these platforms would be equipped with weapons as part of the mobilization process.
Some public estimates suggest that China's use of its dual-capable civilian fleet could provide it greater displacement tonnage than the sum of all of the U.S. Navy's amphibious assault ships. In 2022, the PLA significantly stepped up RARO training to support China's military activities by more than doubling the number of RAROs used to support similar activity in the prior year. Although most of these events consisted of troop movements within or between theaters, several marked a continued maturation towards using RAROs and other civilian shipping to support PLA amphibious force employment against Taiwan.
However, these events have not demonstrated the realism or requisite tactical proficiency to engage in wartime operations. This includes the absence of opposed landing operations in unfavorable weather conditions and sea states.
It also includes a lack of RARO training to operate in convoys, conduct rapid disembarkation, and the offload of PLA forces at sea while underway.
Floating causeway improvement.
During 3 events between May and July 2022, 2 Chinese civilian RAROs participated in docking evolutions with a new floating causeway system intended to allow RAROs to disembark forces onto a beach without seizing a port or being modified to discharge amphibious vehicles at sea. The causeway observed in 2022 featured several improvements over the one used in 2021 to include having 6 uniform self-propelled sections extendable to an additional 200 meters. The causeway system seems to rely on a semi-submersible barge to stabilize the causeway, which may limit its utility for a cross-strait invasion. However, PLA naval writings stress the importance of floating causeways, especially those with wave attenuation capabilities, as one solution to dealing with Taiwan ports that might be inaccessible for offloading operations in wartime. Large volume lift exercise. From mid-July to mid-August, the PLA conducted large amphibious lift exercises along China's northern and southern coast, using 12 civilian ships including 8 large RoRo ferries. The lift capacity, number of vessel stops, and the number of participating ground vehicles suggest this training could have simulated the movement of up to a full group army for the first time. The PLA also conducted a 5-day loading/unloading exercise in September 2022 using 6 RoRos and 3 cargo ships to simulate the movement of a heavy combined arms brigade in a Taiwan invasion.
Denial and deception training. In August 2022, a PLA Air Defense Brigade exercise attempted to obscure observation of its loading onto a RoRo in the Bohai Gulf. A PLA video showed the brigade entering a dockside building where it hid for an undetermined period of time before loading onto a RoRo using a tarp that extended from the building to the ship, likely intended to limit observation of their loading activity.
Austere port operations. In mid-August 2022, a single RoRo supported the transport of roughly 40 vehicles from a portion of Dongshan port that had little cargo handling infrastructure, no pierside RoRo ramp, and no tugboat support. This training suggests the PLA seeks the capability to operate from any intact pier, even ones without offloading infrastructure. RoRo participation in planned amphibious forces. From August 31 to September 2, 2022, the PLA conducted its most complex use of civilian shipping for amphibious assault operation at Dashang Bay and Honghai Bay in southern China. The exercise featured 10 civilian ships, including RoRo ferries and RoRo vehicle carriers, operating alongside planned amphibious ships, including at least one Type 071 LPD. The operations at Dashang Bay made use of the new 6-segment floating causeway, supported by a San Hongong submersible floating barge, which docked with at least one RoRo ferry. RoRos in both exercise area offloaded forces at sea, suggesting stern ramp modifications allowing for at-sea disembarkation are becoming more commonplace within the RoRo fleet. One combined arms amphibious brigade and one combined armed amphibious battalion were believed to have been delivered as part of this exercise. Title 14: The PLA's current posture for a Taiwan conflict. PLAA. The PLAA has increased its posture in the Eastern Theater Command and along the Taiwan Strait, providing the PLAA with enhanced firepower, mobility, and rapid strike capabilities. Significant reorganizations and amphibious assault training in recent years likely indicate that the Taiwan contingency is a high priority for the Army. Major PLA contributions to a Taiwan invasion scenario likely include extensive amphibious, Army aviation, and air assault operations. The PLAA fields 6 amphibious combined arms brigades, 4 in the Eastern Theater Command, nearest Taiwan, and 2 in the Southern Theater Command. PLAA units continued amphibious assault training as a single service and with joint service counterparts in 2022. Training events refined the tactics of rapid loading, long-distance transport and beach assault under complicated sea situations, and logistic support capabilities. Press reports also claimed that the PLA extensively used sea, air, and ground UAS in support of the amphibious assault operation. PLAA amphibious brigades reportedly conduct realistic, large-scale amphibious operations that are almost certainly aimed at supporting a Taiwan invasion scenario. Plan. The plan is improving its anti-air, anti-surface, and ASW capabilities, further developing an at-sea nuclear deterrence, and introducing new multi-mission platforms capable of conducting diverse missions during peace and war, and has increased its posture surrounding Taiwan since August 2022. New attack submarines and modern surface combatants with anti-air capabilities and fourth-generation naval aircraft entering the force are designed to achieve maritime superiority within the FIC as well as to deter and counter any potential third-party intervention in a Taiwan conflict. The PRC's amphibious fleet has in recent years focused on acquiring a modest number of ocean-going LPD and LHA ships. There is no indication the PRC is significantly expanding its number of tank landing ships, LSTs, and medium-sized landing craft at this time. Although the plan has not invested in the large number of landing ships and medium landing craft that analysts believe the PLA would need for a large-scale assault on Taiwan, it is possible the PLA assesses it has sufficient amphibious capacity and has mitigated shortfalls through investment in other operational capabilities, such as civilian lift vessels and rotary wing assets, to address this gap. The PLA may also have confidence in the PRC's shipbuilding industry's massive capacity to produce the necessary ship-to-shore connectors relatively quickly. PLAF. The PLAAF has maintained a ready force posture for a variety of capabilities necessary in a Taiwan contingency. It has acquired a large number of advanced aircraft capable of conducting operations against Taiwan without requiring refueling, providing it with a significant capability to conduct air and ground attack operations. A number of long-range air defense systems provide a strong layer of defense against attacks on key military installations or population centers on China's mainland. The PRC's development of support aircraft provides the PLAAF with improved ISR capability to support PLA operations. The PLAAF also has improved refueling capabilities, expanding its ability to operate further from China and increasing its ability to threaten third-party intervention. Throughout 2022, Eastern Theater Command-based PLAAF units operated at higher levels than in previous years. Taiwan ADIZ incursions involved greater numbers of aircraft and were more frequent than in 2021, demonstrating the PLAF's improved ability to sustain pressure on Taiwan. PLARF. The PLARF is prepared to conduct missile attacks against high-value targets, including Taiwan's C-2 facilities, air bases, and radar sites, in an attempt to degrade Taiwan's defenses, neutralize Taiwan's leadership, or break the public's will to fight. As of 2023, the PLARF is increasing its presence along the Taiwan Strait with new missile brigades, possibly indicating an increasing number of deployed missiles. Strategic Support Force, SSF. PLA doctrinal writings emphasize the importance of space and cyberspace domains in joint operations. PLA writings suggest that the SSF would be responsible for the use of EW and cyberspace operations during a Taiwan contingency, as one of the missions of the force is to seize and maintain information dominance. The SSF 311 base would be responsible for political and psychological warfare, such as disseminating propaganda against Taiwan to influence public opinion and promote the PRC's interests. The SSF would also play a strategic information and communication support role, centralizing technical intelligence collection and management and providing strategic intelligence support to theater commands involved in a Taiwan contingency. Following the U.S. Speaker of the House's Codel in August 2022, Taiwan's MND claimed that China launched widespread cyber attacks against Taiwan. Joint Logistics Support Force, JLSF. The JLSF's primary goal is to provide joint logistics support to the PLA's strategic and campaign-level operations, such as a Taiwan contingency, by conducting C2 of joint logistics, delivering material, and overseeing various support mechanisms. The JLSF participates in joint, theater-level exercises, becoming most relevant when units operate far from their home garrisons and beyond their organic logistics capabilities. Title 15, Taiwan's ability to deter the mainland. Taiwan has positioned itself as a beacon of democracy to generate international support and expand regional security ties. Taiwan is taking steps to compensate for the growing disparity with the PLA, including building its war reserve stocks, growing its defense industrial base, improving joint operations and crisis response capabilities, and strengthening its officer and non-commissioned officer corps. Taiwan's Quadrennial Defense Review 2021 reflects adjustments to the military strategy for defending the island by placing emphasis on protecting its littorals and nearshore coastal areas in a multi-layered defense in-depth. The modified strategy stresses enhanced asymmetric and joint capabilities, as well as suggesting greater reliance on Taiwan's Air Force and Navy through multi-domain deterrence measures. In 2022, Russia's war on Ukraine and the PRC's forceful response to then U.S. Speaker of the House's codel to Taiwan in August increased the urgency with which Taiwan is pursuing defense reforms. The PRC's response to the then U.S. House Speaker's visit accelerated the PRC's ongoing military and gray zone activity toward Taiwan.
The PRC's actions likely intended to establish a new status quo and to place greater operational demands on Taiwan's military.
Taiwan's planned improvements only partially address its defense challenges, and a majority of Taiwan citizens believe that the then Speaker's visit and the PLA response were detrimental to Taiwan's security. Taiwan's armed forces are authorized to fill approximately 215,000 billets, including 188,000 active duty billets. As of 2021, the MND had accomplished its goal to fill 90% of the active duty billets, 169,000, with volunteers. As Taiwan transitions to an all-volunteer force, the cost savings from manpower reductions provided some margin to improve individual pay and benefits, housing, and incentive pay. However, these savings have been insufficient to cover the full increase in manpower-related costs needed to attract and retain personnel under the new system.
Taiwan also faces considerable equipment and readiness obstacles.
Reservists, conscripts, and civil defense volunteers support the volunteer active duty forces.
Taiwan's number of reserve personnel ranges from 1 to 2 million, while there are fewer than 500,000 conscripts. In 2021, Taiwan passed legislation to establish an organization to improve the mobilization of reserves and civilians to support military operations. In 2022, Taiwan implemented this legislation by establishing the All-Out Defense Mobilization Agency, which coordinates a whole-of-society approach to support military operations and disaster prevention and response. In December 2022, Taiwan announced that it would extend the duration of mandatory military conscription service from 4 months to 1 year and double conscripts' monthly salary starting in 2024. Taiwan continues to increase its defense budget to support defense acquisitions and strengthen its forces against Chinese pressure. In 2020, the Tsai administration announced defense spending to be the highest level since 1990. In October 2022, Taiwan proposed total defense spending of about $19 billion for 2023, a 13.9% increase from 2022, which will represent about 2.4% of Taiwan's GDP. In January 2022, Taiwan approved an $8 billion multi-year supplemental defense budget to strengthen Taiwan's air and sea combat capabilities. Over half of Taiwan's supplemental defense spending will fund missile corvettes and anti-ship weapons, such as the Sung-Foam missile system.
Meanwhile, China's official defense budget continues to grow to around $230 billion in 2022, about 12 times larger than Taiwan's defense budget, with much of China's defense budget focused on developing the capability to unify Taiwan with the PRC by force. Recognizing the growing disparity between their respective defense expenditures, Taiwan has stated that it is working to develop new cost-effective concepts and capabilities for asymmetric warfare. Specific areas of emphasis in Taiwan's strategy include offensive and defensive information and electronic warfare, high-speed stealth vessels, shore-based mobile missiles, rapid mining and minesweeping, unmanned aerial systems, and critical infrastructure protection. Taiwan has also dedicated significant defense spending toward its Harpoon coastal defense systems, domestic submarine program, upgrading its existing F-16 fighters and producing the remaining 3 of a previously planned 4 transport docks. The United States maintains a One China policy that is based on the TRA, the 3 US-PRC joint communiques, and the 6 assurances, opposes unilateral actions aimed at altering the status quo, and continues to support the peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues in a manner, scope, and pace acceptable to both sides. Consistent with the TRA, the United States contributes to peace, security, and stability in the Taiwan Strait by providing defense articles and services to enable Taiwan to maintain a sufficient self-defense capability. Since 2009, Taiwan has received about $30 billion in arms sales from the United States. Taiwan currently has arms sales agreements to acquire Stinger missiles, Javelins, high-mobility artillery rocket systems, Harpoon missiles, and F-16 fighter jets.